Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Derek Brown, and in today's video, we're going to talk about 7 players you need to be higher on than ECR on FantasyPros.com, and all of the glorious analysis for this video and for all these players comes from the primer. So head over to FantasyPros.com, check out my weekly article, The Primer, right now for all of this analysis. Let's get to the players. All right, first player we got to discuss here is Brock Purdy, coming in at QB 13 in ECR right now, and this comes down to Chicago Bears, their pass defense, not necessarily the entire team, but their defense has kind of quit. They have been bottom of the league over the last few weeks, and I think this is a matchup. Again, we're talking about CMC is out, Jordan Mason is out. Yes, I like Isaac Guerrero this week, but also, this is a really good spot for Brock Purdy to light it up this week. You look at Chicago since week 8. This pass defense is allowing the 11th highest success rate per dropback, the 4th highest yards per attempt. They've been bad defending deep passing, and they're allowing the 12th highest passer rating. So Brock Purdy, assuming he's fully healthy, which we haven't heard any news to say that he's not right now, he's going to have a really good day. So consider him in all of your leagues as a strong QB1 for week 14. All right, before I get to the next player on this list, and we're going to move over to tight ends, I gotta make a PSA, a disclaimer about this week's video. All the bye weeks and so many different matchups, it was hard coming up with a list, I'll be honest. So we're gonna go deep down the list because I know all these teams on bye, you need, I need, we all need flex plays. So we're gonna talk about some deeper players on this week's list. And no, there's no running backs making the list because either it's a lot of very uneasy situations. Sincere McCormick, I'm looking at you, almost made the list for this week, but Madison comes back, who knows? So looking at wide receivers that might still be available on waiver wires out there, and the tight end we're about to talk about, Will Dissly, coming in at a tight end 12 for the week. And I know, you're probably like me and you're saying, that goose egg last week really hurt, okay? Am I really going to go back to the well for Will Dissly? And I'm telling you, you should. Looking at what he did prior to last week's just ghost performance, 0 points. I get it. Weeks 7 through 12, Will Dissly put up 2 tight end 1 weeks. He had a 19.1% target share, 19.3% first read share, and over 2.0 yards per route run. Those numbers alone should give Dissly a little bit of grace when looking at him for week 14. But also, he gets arguably the best matchup for tight ends, and Ladd McConkey is banged up. Even if he plays this week, we know he's not going to be 100%. And at the time of watching this video, he might have already gotten ruled out. So Will Dissly could be the number 1 option in this passing attack. You look at Kansas City versus tight ends this year, it's bad, people. It's really bad. They've allowed the most receiving yards per game to the position and the 4th most fantasy points per game. You need to fire up Will Dissly, even if you're not playing him in your tight end spot this week, as a strong flex play for week 14. All right, now we're going to break into all these wide receivers that I got for you this week. And the first guy that we need to have a conversation about, and I'm going to lead off with, is Amari Cooper. And looking at last week's role, he had a 58% route share, and people are going to say, man, okay, well, he's still a part-time player. Why do you care about Amari Cooper? He didn't do anything last week, still a part-time player. A lot is getting lost in the sauce with that snow game. You look at Amari Cooper and the blowout fashion of that game. You look at Amari Cooper last week, in the first half of that game, had a 70% route share. That was second on the team behind only Khalil Shakir. And you look at his per route numbers since he's been with Buffalo, been pretty good. 19% target per route run rate, 2.0 yards per route run. This is setting up as the breakout game for Amari Cooper. Assuming that the Rams can keep this close, Amari Cooper can have himself a day. So even if, look, at the time of recording this, we don't have betting lines. But if you're looking at this video, and right now I'm telling you, you need to head over to bettingpros.com right now, and we need to be considering betting Amari Cooper ladders for this week, because I think this could be the breakout spot. And if it is, I'd be very happy that you did. The Rams, since week 7 to perimeter wide receivers, they're allowing the highest PPR points per target. So if Amari Cooper gets the 70 to 80% route share, maybe even higher than that, because we don't know what happens with Keon Coleman this week. I think he plays, but does he play even in a full-time capacity? And what if Dalton Kincaid is out? Amari Cooper could be the #1 option in this passing attack, or at least fighting for that with Khalil Shakir this week. You need to be confident in playing Amari Cooper for week 14. Okay, staying with the wide receivers here, Jordan Addison is a name that has not been brought up on this video for the entirety of this season, but we got to talk about him this week. Wide receiver 33 in ECR. I'm telling you, look, this guy's probably going to be a wide receiver 2 this week. He's done it in 3 of his last 5 games, posted top 24 weekly fantasy scores in 3 of the last 5 games as a top 24 guy. So I think he could do it again this week. Looking at Atlanta's secondary, it's been bad, people. They're not pressuring the quarterback. Sam Darnold's going to have all day. I think this is not only the blow-up spot for Justin Jefferson, we've been waiting all season, but Jordan Addison is coming along for the ride this week. You look at this Atlanta secondary since week 8, they're allowing the 7th most receiving yards per game and the 4th highest PPR points per target to outside wide receivers. Jordan Addison is going to have himself a day in week 14. All right, before we get to the top 3 players I got to talk about this week, if you are juggling multiple fantasy football teams and feeling overwhelmed at this time of year, FantasyPros is here to help you simplify things. With the FantasyPros Multi-League Assistant, you can see the latest news, notes, and rankings for every single player across all of your teams that are playoff bound, all in one spot, making your path to victory clearer and easier. I want you to dive in right now and let us help you dominate all of your leagues right now with the Multi-League Assistant at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Download it today. Okay, breaking into the top 3 players of this week's list, got to talk about MVS. He's basically Nick Westbrook-Akine, but with deep passing. We keep saying he can't do it. It's going to stop. The train is going to get derailed. And MVS says, I'm catching these deep targets, baby. And I think he does it again this week. You look at MVS since week 10, 18.1 fantasy points per game. And I know you're saying that's unsustainable. I get it. 60% of his target volume has been on deep passes. Now, why am I still high on MVS for this week? Well, because look, he gets arguably the best matchup for deep passing on the board. And Saints are down even more weapons this week. So it's going to be MVS. It's going to be Juwan Johnson leading the passing attack. And you look at the Giants, they can't stop deep passing, people. They've allowed the 5th most deep passing yards per game this season and the highest deep passer rating this season. MVS does it again in week 14. Okay, to the next wide receiver on this list, and I'm telling you, we're going down the list. I'm digging deep for you on players that I have conviction that I think can produce in week 14. We have to discuss Brandin Cooks. And you're going to say, well, he scored a touchdown last week. You're point chasing, right? No. We are not point chasing here. This comes down to matchup. This comes down to role and all the different things for this week. And Brandin Cooks has a perfect recipe for success this week. Last week, returned 19% target share. I know the receiving yards weren't there, but it's the Cincinnati Bengals, man. They're allowing production to everybody playing in the wide receiver position. So I think Cooks, the receiving yards go up this week, saw the 19% target share, 22% first read share, and he also led the team last week with 2 end zone targets. So while, yeah, okay, he scored last week. Can he do it again this week? I think he can do it again this week, and he can put up the receiving yardage numbers with it, especially because we know Cincinnati is going to push Dallas. They're going to push them to pass and score points this week. And if you look at Cincinnati versus wide receivers since week 8, 3rd most fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers, 5th most receiving yards per game to that position. Brandin Cooks, while it might not be a sexy name, and he's coming in at wide receiver 56 in ECR right now, it's a name you need to have in your lineups and as a flex play for week 14. Okay, to the top player on this week's list, and again, going even further down the list, he might actually still be on waiver wires right now. So if you're listening to the sound of my voice right now, go to your league. If you're struggling, pick him up, start him this week. We don't even know if Mike Evans plays. This all leads me to Sterling Shepard. Wide receiver 60 in ECR right now. Since Mike Evans returned, so over the last 2 games, Sterling Shepard seeing a 21.9% target share. He is seeing a 27% first read share. Those numbers are elite. And I know that he hasn't put up like massive box scores. I get that. He's due, though, people. Over the last 2 games, He has 4 red zone targets. So we're talking about regression, baked in regression, to score a touchdown this week. Much less if Mike Evans, okay, it's trending, and as you're listening to this, I don't know if he's going to play or not this week. He's banged up. He's been missing practices. We're assuming that Evans goes this week. Even if he does play, we know he's going to be less than 100% this week. So again, more target volume. 2, Sterling Shepard to Cade Otton. Shepard has the matchup to crush this week. Since week 8, Las Vegas cannot stop slot wide receivers. If you checked out this list a few weeks ago, this is why I talked to you about Devon Vele. This is why we're talking about Sterling Shepard. Since week 8, the Raiders are allowing the 3rd most receiving yards per game, the most fantasy points per game on the board, 2 slot wide receivers, and the 4th highest PPR points per target. So we're talking about baked in touchdown regression. The role is good, has quietly been good, and the matchup is glorious. You need to consider flexing Sterling Shepard in week 14. All right, everyone, that's the list. That is the 7 players that I'm higher on than ECR that you need to be considering for flex plays for this week. Head over to FantasyPros.com right now. Read the primer. It's going to be updated all the way to kickoff on Sunday, trying to give you the goods to not only get the W's this week, but to advance in the fantasy playoffs if they've already started, and as well as use the multi-league assistant. Let us help you dominate all of your leagues this week. I'll see you for week 15.